Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. Fat. I can't believe
that. Good time of day, everyone, whenever, wherever, however, all that ever you are listening. Welcome to episode 214 of Americans Watching the Footy, our grand final recap. You know, I was telling my friend Nick, with whom I went to the LA Dragons watch party, not many grand finals are that close or compelling for 3/4, if that. Yeah, I was right, disappointingly so this time. I am Benjamin Castle, coming to you from San Diego, California.
I am Ethan Castle, coming to you from South San Francisco, California. And yeah, not the grand final I expected in terms of outcome. I thought it was going to be, like a 30-point Swans win or something. But before we get any further, I guess just, credit to the Brisbane Lions for absolutely kicking their asses in pretty much every aspect of the game. And being only the second team to win the flag from outside of the top four since, what year was this final system adopted?
The current final system was adopted in 2000.
And at times this year, I thought, oh, they're done for, just like when they started 0-3, I said this team could and probably should still make finals, but they're going to run out of gas because coming back from 0-3 is just really hard. 3 rounds into the season, I thought they had pretty much killed their chances of winning a flag this year. Also, just getting to back-to-back grand finals is hard. You've got a shorter offseason, you've got more injuries to deal with. Then they got hit with all these injuries at the start of the year. Everyone tore their ACL, and they just won the whole thing pretty convincingly. There is a bit of me that feels, man, the Cats were maybe 3 minutes away from actually winning a flag. On the other hand, I don't feel bad about the Lions winning. This specific core is about to transition some, especially as, Zorko's nearly done. Ashcroft is emerging, obviously. And it would have been wrong for this group of Brisbane Lions players to not win a flag with how good they've been over a prolonged period. So I am quite happy for them. And we've got some pretty good Lions fans. We've got pretty good fans of both these teams online. So there are definitely people I would have been happy for on both sides of this, no matter the outcome.
Yeah, actually, someone we met online and then in person, our listener Cameron, ended up going to the grand final. And yeah, good choice, Cameron.
Glad you made it. I want to ask you about your watch party experience and how it compared to the one we went to in San Francisco last year, aside from that, you obviously spent the entire night, since it was hosted by the LA Dragons, fighting the incredible urge to make a bunch of Dragon D's nuts jokes.
These nuts? Got him!
Busby's has a bigger floor space than Buzzworks does, and it's all one floor, so it's more properly spread out, actually had room to stand up and move around a bit. Just good experience all around. It was definitely more Swans fans than Lions. I want to say probably 3-1.
But was the actual event itself and the whole viewing experience really different than the one we had, or was it fundamentally similar?
Guess it was a little different in terms of just more TVs around the place instead of one giant screen, but it meant that more people got better views, so I didn't really mind.
But your overall experience was pretty similar?
Yeah, I would say so. I'm glad that I knew somebody up there, which compelled us to go up there in the first place. So thanks, Rick.
And also to Rick, yikes, 50 points allowed to the Lobos. Ugh.
Yeah, so we've been kind of hinting at this for a bit. Our friend Rick Shabani, who's in our fantasy league and who whom we met through Coach Donnie Hess. Because of that, Donnie from Donnie's Disposal. Rick is the rare GWS Giants, New Mexico State Aggies combo.
Also just rare New Mexico State fan from the East Coast, New Mexico State alum from the East Coast who's not an athlete.
Yeah, he's actually from Lynchburg, Virginia, which is the city where I guess, conference mate of New Mexico State is located, and one he absolutely despises.
But yeah, just that's a rough loss.
And he was cheering for the Lions, but at the same time, this does feel like the worst possible matchup for Giants fans. Your big brother rival against the team you were up 44 points on in the second half of your semifinal.
I mean, it was either the team you were up 44 on or the team you were up like 30 on. So it was rough either way. Now, I guess, because, no, never mind. I guess with this final structure, we can't quite have the ultimate loser like you could have, in the NHL or NBA or something.
You kind of can. If we work our way backwards.
I mean, Brisbane beat Sydney, who beat Port, who beat Hawthorn, who beat the Bulldogs.
The Bulldogs are the ultimate losers. They are the furthest number of steps away from the flag, because at least the Blues directly lost to the Lions.
Yeah. I mean, we can also laugh at them for how bad they were, but yeah, I guess congrats Bulldogs on being the ultimate loser. So the actual game itself, the biggest takeaways I had, pretty complete team effort by Brisbane instead of like one obvious star. I'm still trying to figure out my votes for the last of our votes for the year, really, for, I guess, America's Gary Ayers Award.
Oh yeah, we should give the final score a perfect doubling. Sydney 9-6-60 defeated by Brisbane 18-12-120. Darcy Ford is a premiership player. Another backup Geelong ruck. It's every 6 years at this point. Shane Mumford 2012, Nathan Vardy 2018, now Darcy Ford. Oh, and Logan Morris needs that Macca's commercial. Get a 60-second ad spot. I don't care if you've never done it before, Macca's. You need a Logan Morris story. Like, what a way to promote yourselves. Do like a whole barbecue Angus meal deal based off him.
You could air that commercial like worldwide, honestly. Even people who don't know anything about footy could appreciate he ran the equivalent of half a marathon and ate McDonald's in the middle.
And was playing in shoes a size too small. I feel like you got to work that in somewhere. Oh, the guy whose shoes he was wearing, the youngest Norm Smith medalist ever, Will Ashcroft. Well fucking done.
I don't know. On my rewatch, I just got through like the full third quarter. I don't know if there's like an obvious Norm Smith medalist this year. Last year it was obvious. I now have an excuse to really rewatch and scrutinize the 22 grand final. I want to do that at some point and figure out, should Isaac Smith have won the Norm Smith or should it have been somebody else?
If it were somebody else, it would have been Dangerfield, who was my pick. I was fine between a mix of Ashcroft, Neal, Achi. Yeah, I was unsure about Cal Achi playing that role on Nick Blakey. I thought there were two just pretty diametrically opposed players in terms of ground versus air. But no, Achi had enough sprint speed and enough pressure on the ground to neutralize the lizard.
During this finals run, Achi was kind of the guy, like, every time he gets involved, we're scoring. He kind of was the Brad Close.
And he had the job on Whitfield in the semifinal, had the job on Stewart in the prelim, Blakey in the grand final, and won those each time. He also kicked the go-ahead goal in the prelim. So it just all felt very fitting.
Looking around, there were a couple other guys that I really liked. I loved the way Hugh McCluggage played that first quarter. Oh, he kind of did fade after that. Brandon Starcevich was super clean throughout. I liked Ryan Lester. But yeah, trying to like order these is tough. Like this could honestly be, if this was a home and away game, this would honestly very possibly get, and understandably get, the fuck it, El Neal 3 votes treatment. Because like during that second quarter stretch where the Lions really pulled away, I didn't see any one player stand out. I thought it was largely by committee. I actually thought that was probably some of Kai Lohman's best work, because like the first couple of goals he scored weren't anything remarkable. The third one on the run was pretty awesome, but other than that, it was just like some of the other stuff he did that made him such a valuable player.
At the assist to Hipwood, Eric Hipwood with the Jason Ackermanis goal and celebration, that was awesome. jaw agape, hand over mouth thing. Like, I can't believe I just did that. That references Jason Ackermanis from back in 2005, round 13 against Geelong.
It was a pretty good goal, and it was a very un-Eric Hipwood goal.
Like, my thought was, that's a Danaher kick.
I did think we got a very Joe Danaher game for the most part. Kind of, you never knew where the ball was going off of his foot in any direction.
But he was so positively impacted the game physically pretty much anywhere he went, being able to size up on whichever defender he was on, playing a pretty prominent second ruck goal splitting time efficiently with Darcy Ford. So yeah, looking back at that Ackermanis game that I was talking about here, it was raining and he kicked 5-2 with 3 assists. I want to go back and take a look at this now. It's like the most 3-vote game that I could think of. But yeah, Hipwood getting that felt like it was close to a dagger to me. It wasn't really over before Cam Rayner took his mark off the back. I mean, I don't like ever saying a game is over by halftime. Rayner definitely was the one to end it in the third. Like, at what point, Ethan, did you feel, all right, we're done?
I would say, maybe the first goal of the third quarter, which was Achi.
Yeah, that was his third.
You were saying something, and I'm just going to mention this real quick. It's a little off topic, but, you said, that's a 3-vote game in reference to Jason Ackermanis, right?
Mm-hmm.
How about 3 goals behind, 29 disposals, 13 tackles, 7 clearances, 7 marks, 2 goal assists, 504 meters gained, 11 score involvements, 11 contested possessions, 82.8% disposal efficiency. Doesn't that sound like a 3-vote game?
Let me guess, somebody got no votes for that.
Correct. Oh, and 26 pressure acts, the third most in the game, and 3 score launches.
Is this a Ryan Myers game from this year?
No, it was Brent Daniels round 23 against Frio.
Yeah, how the fuck did Binga not get a single vote?
You could have made a case for a couple other guys to be the 3, but for him to not get any was insane.
Yeah, looking back at this grand final now, though, problems early with Brisbane navigating the breeze, but even bigger problems for Sydney, keeping their entry kicks too high, some easy intercepts there for the likes of Andrews and Starcevic. Once the Lions managed to kick accurately, there wasn't really a problem. Yeah, I noticed some really nice play from McCluggage in the first quarter. And the reason why, going back, I like Ashcroft for the Norm Smith is because when Brisbane were under pressure around center halfback, his short handballs just started things off really well. Really, handballs of any, with the short ones. 2 guys like McCluggage started those plays to get out of congestion. He was able to get involved in some of the longer passages as well, some smart 1-2s. Amazing how well he sees the field for someone who has lived his entire life in the span of which Essendon have won a single final. He was born May 6th of 2004. Oh yeah, and his brother's on the way next year.
He deserves so much credit for how he managed to get back into the swing of things. He did not miss a beat. First game back. It was here we go.
Yeah, that was round 16 against Melbourne when he came back. You remember that game because that was the State of Origin game.
Yes.
I feel like I need to do that as a short this offseason, just getting the funny whistle in there.
I would like for us to do more shorts altogether, or do little 2-minute videos, kind of 5 points Vince has done a bunch of. Because remember you had that one of a Charlie Dixon smother and how he had a similar situation a couple years earlier. I think it would be neat if we did more things like that, because I actually seem to sort of do numbers, not amazing, but better than, the damn, this doing numbers.
The thing that surprised me most about the strategy in this grand final was that Sydney was willing to hang back when Brisbane got their intercepts, their defensive 50 intercepts. I thought Sydney would be the type to try and pressure them right away, and when they didn't in the first quarter, I was thinking, okay, is Longmire just not wanting them to get fatigued too early? Is he going to start bringing into the second? Instead, the Lions were able to just kick around the defensive half pretty much however they wanted. They had 46 marks in the first quarter when they averaged 27 entering the game this year. Their magic number reminder over the past few years has been 110. And then the marking there just kind of translated to better things all over the ground. They picked out spots at the corridor well. They had 14 marks inside 50 in the first half alone, when the Swans usually concede 11 per game. And right when we were worried about the Lions keeping the door open with their inaccuracy, They kicked 5 goals from 19 kicks, which was very similar to a stretch that they put on in the third quarter 2 weeks prior against the Giants. This time, though, when they were adding to a lead.
I've got a difficult question for you. Who would get the non-existent finals polished turd from this game? Because this might be one of the toughest ones I've ever had to deal with.
You see, it's tough because you'd have to go back and look at the first half for a lot because Chad Warner and Luke Parker ran rampant when the game was already over.
I did like some of Warner even before that.
Parker, meanwhile, did do a decent enough job on Andrews at times.
I thought just like when Warner got involved, he was able to impact things with his speed and get guys moving. It didn't happen enough, but I don't think you could really fault him. Whereas I guess you could fault him for just not getting the ball more out of the middle, but it's not like clearances were super lopsided. So
it did feel like they were. I'd love to see that breakdown by quarter because it seemed like every time at the center balance, Brisbane got an extra man out. By the way, as we're recording this, it is just in. The Gary Ayres Award goes to Lachie Neale.
I'm okay with that. I don't think he should have gotten all the love he did last week. Thought he was decent. This week, I get it.
So he and Will Ashcroft both got 13.5 because remember, it's a 50% boost for the grand final. So if we're just going by like the regular numbers, like it would be for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Ashcroft and Neale both on 9, Achi 5, Lohman 4, Darcevic 2, and Danaher 1.
Surprised not to see any representation for Hugh McCluggage in there. I think I also would have considered Ryan Lester.
I would have definitely put Starcevic over Lester, so I'm happy for that. McCluggage, again, good impact early, but I think Ashcroft did more to get things out of defense and impact the game as a whole. I am fine with Ashcroft winning the Norm Smith.
This is a tough one to try to differentiate and rank like best players because I think the most important moments were by committee. So that is like, what do you go to next? Do you go to volume? Do you go to efficiency? I mean, if you just look at the stat page, Lachie Neale put up an insane body of work. Like to the eye test, it wasn't like, oh my God, he's absolutely dominating this game because he's had some games that he has completely controlled from start to finish.
Neale did get the most clearances for the Lions with 9. His efficiency was, pretty good as well, 85.7. He and Ashcroft were both right up there in terms of pretty even splits.
I'm just saying that, like, in real time, you're not watching this thinking like, oh my God, Lachie Neale is absolutely owning this game, which he's had a bunch of games where we definitely have said that. And I don't think this was necessarily one of those. I think by a nose, he might be the best player in this game. I am kind of glad after all of the fuck it, L. Neale 3 votes that he's not. It wasn't like, fuck it, give him the Norm Smith. But actually watching this game, you can totally make an argument for it. Whereas, like, I look at, for example, their win over the Bulldogs. I'm looking through some of their games from this past year. When they beat the Bulldogs in round 13, like, you could show that game to anybody. It's like, yeah, Lachie Neale's the guy tonight.
It's fitting on a team that's as deep in the midfield as this team is, and as deep in every part of the ground as they are, that it was by committee. Having said that, if you're looking forward, I've said that this year has felt like a passing of the torch from Charlie Cameron to Kai Lohman, and that's continued, I think, with Lohman taking more of those deeper options. I had Lohman as my sleeper for the Lions going into this year. Remember, before this year, he had kicked 1-5 from 8 career games. 36 goals in 27 games this year, including 4 in the grand final. And he got me and Nick singing, "Oops, I did it again" each time.
I appreciated the country roads after the Cameron goal. I thought this was actually one of Charlie's better games, for the record. He did this at times matched up with like a much larger opponent in Lewis Melican. Sydney's defense as a whole was not good in this game. I mean, we've known that they're not a team with a lot of great, like, lockdown one-on-one guys. And, like, as much as I like Dane Rampy, he's starting to show his age. Tom McCartan really struggled. Nick Blakey is a great ball mover. He is not a great one-on-one defender, and he actually got outran a few times in this game, like Achi putting on the afterburners. Harry Cunningham was really poor. And Brisbane was at like nearly 70% efficiency inside 50, which is a pretty terrible reflection on the Sydney defense as a whole.
The Lions were going a little under 2 points per inside 50 this year, which is pretty insane in and of itself.
And they were doing that despite some really terrible set shot kicking.
For the grand final, 120 points from 51 inside 50s. That is 2.35 points per entry. Thanks to Cody Atkinson and Sean Lawson for those numbers. Was looking at their article about, where the game could be won and lost, and then where it was. The Lions have been the most consistent team in terms of points per inside 50. But over the past few years, they've been, since 2021, 1.87, 1.88, 1.91, and before the final, 1.91, and that's gone up a tick. And yeah, to do that despite poor set shot kicking just tells you how much they're able to play through the chaos and are willing to generate it themselves.
I'm kind of getting some 2021 Atlanta Braves vibes out of this Lions team. Now, they didn't lose their best player to an ACL injury, but they did have a bunch of ACL injuries, and they ended up winning in spite of a lot of missing pieces, whether that be guys like Kadeen Coleman and Lincoln McCarthy, not having Oscar McInerney for the grand final, and that really didn't become much of an issue. Clearances were just about even despite the 2-to-1 disparity in hitouts.
Remember that they also lost Darcy Gardner to an ACL, and that Tom Duday didn't play at all this year, despite having been one of their trade acquisitions last year.
The other reason I'm drawing this comparison is because thinking back to those 2021 Braves, the mentality, the perception after they won that thing was like, oh man, if they can do this without all of this, think about what they can do with their guys. And now in the 3 seasons since, they've had 2 division series losses to the Phillies, and then this year makes the playoffs. But this season has also come with not just another Ronald Acuna injury, but also a Spencer Strider injury and a whole bunch of others. But just that same sort of idea of man, this thing could really go for a long time, because while Dane Zorko doesn't have that many years left, and we'll see about Joe Danaher, the reaction he got from his teammates after his late goal makes me think he might actually be hanging him up, which would be very weird considering he's certainly still got a few years in him. But this is also Joe Danaher, who's just a delightfully weird character.
He finished with the 3rd most goals for the year if you count finals,
despite missing a bunch of really easy shots. Second being, who was in second?
Cameron.
Okay, that makes sense. So Hogan, Cameron, Danaher.
Remember, Cameron had the 9 in round 24 against the Eagles. So Danaher in home and away finished 6th and then added on 8 more in the finals.
I just want to say how cool it is, and I'm sure there are some Essendon fans that are bothered by this, but how cool it is that Joe Danaher is now a premiership player, and just I don't know if as much of his strangeness got documented during his time at Essendon, but that he's become this really funny character because he's such a, to use the term, unique individual.
Thanks, Basil.
He is a very weird character in the footy world, and I'm glad that he is now immortalized as a premiership player, because I've said this many times. He's a weirdo, but a very enjoyable one, completely harmless weirdo.
As opposed to, how about the guy who was in the Amy ad at the start delivering the game ball for some reason?
I didn't see this, but I'm going to guess Reese Matheson.
Yeah, he was involved in the Amy Clanger, ball missing type thing near the beginning of the ad. The thing is, he had a full shirt on and everything. I thought they were just going to show him completely swole.
Let's see. Other questions, because I didn't get to take in the full experience. I'm going back and watching all of that. But how was the Katy Perry performance?
I'm still not sure how much of it was actually her versus lip syncing. All the dancers wearing orange were only possible because of something that happened 2 weeks prior.
GWS losing?
Yeah.
Oh, they must have wanted a neutral color then.
Why couldn't you just plan green or something from the beginning then?
Yeah, you have a point.
Until 2028, green is still neutral. It was very easy to predict that she would open with Roar and close with Firework, just as she did for Super Bowl 49. This time, though, she didn't have the budget for a, 20-foot mechanical lion.
Yeah. Between Roar and just the fact that Lockie Neal took his hand off the cup second, we should have seen this coming.
Also, we should have seen Logan McDonald being the Sam Reed of this year.
I do not think so. Sorry, I do not think he was the Sam Reed. I think this is a totally different situation. And it was just the ball wasn't coming in his direction, not that he was actively doing anything wrong. So I think that's an inaccurate comparison. Whereas Sam Reed was clearly, they tried to slide him under the door before it closed and it did not work. Whereas this, I thought they were thorough. They checked off all the boxes and then he just ended up re-aggravating something. I do not fault them at all for that.
I'm not sure because I don't think he looked right from the beginning. There were some questions really going late into the week, like Wednesday, Thursday, about his health. And you also contrast that with Callum Mills as well. The thing is also, with Reed, they had options behind him that were far easier to put in. I think Logan McDonald was one of them.
Yeah, who would you have even... I guess you could have gone and just had Campbell in, and then your sub could have been someone out of Cleary or Fox or Adams.
That would have meant you would have been going with a smaller look in the first place, unless you did the unthinkable.
The unthinkable being...
recalling Pete Laddams for a grand final.
Yeah, no. But I also probably would advocate, especially after seeing how good Brisbane's tall defenders were a week ago, going smaller. I mean, at ground level, you're still dealing with Starcevic, and Leicester's pretty gifted in that as well. But I'd much rather do that than try to bomb it in against Andrews and Payne and Leicester. I guess what I'm trying to say out of all of this is Logan McDonald was not impactful on why the Swans lost this game. The TLDR version is just midfield was poor, defense was even worse.
Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did. How did you know that number, Ethan? Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters. Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed. It's so easy you can edit it while drunk. And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do. Best of all, it's completely free. Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
And welcome back to episode 214 of Americans Watching the Footy. You can find us on Twitter at Americans Footy. We're on YouTube at Americans Footy. Hey, you may even be watching this on YouTube right now. Quick question. Will the Brisbane Lions also comment how good on our grand final recap YouTube video?
I find it far less likely for them to do that than for Collingwood, so prove me wrong at Brisbane Lions.
We're also on Instagram, and then personally, I'm on Twitter at Castle Media.
I'm at BenjaminHK01. The executive producer, Brian Harambe, is on Instagram at cat named Brian.
And he just jumped off my bed. I guess next order of business is just kind of roll the postmortems for this team in right now, instead of do them on an episode, because it's not like there's anything to preview for next week. The job is finished. So I guess let's start with the Swans, who became the first minor premiers since Port in 2020 did not win the flag.
Who were the last minor premiers to make the grand final and lose it? Because Geelong didn't make it in 2019. Richmond didn't make it in 2018 because Mason cocked a four-peat. I guess it was Adelaide in 2017. So are we in for a terrible Swans preseason camp?
Ooh, hopefully nobody's trying to walk across burning coals.
Again, do Australians get the American office or not?
No, this was a thing that happened with the Crows.
I know that, but I also think of...
But it also happened in the office, yes.
Yeah, I also think about Dwight.
Pam actually managed to do it, just nobody was watching, and she just decided, you know what, I'm going to do this.
And you're disgusting, Dwigged.
So the Swans finished all alone at 17-6. They had the early loss to Richmond, which is really funny.
They also lost by 112 to Port in round 21, only to turn that around by 148 points in the prelim.
Yeah, they lost 5 out of 6, rounds 16 through 21. The one win was a 79-point Draxing of North.
Drax. Sklouts.
And then they were about to lose a 6 out of 7 and then came back against Collingwood to basically end their season. Played from behind against GWS, won pretty comfortably against Port, and then never really had it here. But there were stretches really from after their first bye, because remember, they were an opening round team. They played the Suns round 6, and from there up through round 15, they were hardly in any close games. They did have some really slow starts in those, including a home game against Geelong where they gave up the first 5 goals. There was the game against the Bulldogs where they were able to pull away because a whole bunch of important players got hurt, most significantly Ed Richards. But overall, they were just a super dominant team. Like their 27-point win in the second Sydney Derby of the year at GWS does not represent how lopsided that game was.
Right after that, though, they started their stretch of 5 out of 6 losses. The first 3 of them were within 2 points. There was the Logan McDonald miss, there was the bet game, and then there was round 19 against the Lions, which I went back and watched going into the grand final. And I'm very glad that I did, because I think it provided good context in terms of some of the matchups.
So really, they had 2 games this year where they absolutely got their asses beat in the home and away season. The one against Richmond was pretty close most of the way, though they got the last goal to get it back within a goal. So it's not like it was so much down to the final siren.
No, it was just Bulldogs round 20 was a pretty comfortable Bulldogs win, and then round 21 Port, which is why this grand final feels like such an aberration until you remember, wait, the Swans just can't bring it in grand finals at all for some reason. They now lost their last 4.
Also, I don't think they have the excuse like they do in 2022, where it was like, we just ran into the best team. You were the best team. So I think some uncomfortable questions need to be asked about, like, what are you doing that's caused this to happen multiple times? Especially the Swans should have been the ones doing this to the Lions. They were the obvious best team start to finish. They were in position for this all year. They had an amazing qualifying final win, and then a prelim where, no, it wasn't the absolute beatdown like the Cats handed to the Lions in 22, but it was like, this is clearly the best team. And then they do that.
And aside from the Logan McDonald injury within the game, the re-aggravation, it's not like there was any real medical concern as well. This was, pretty close to the best 22-23 that you would want, even without Mills.
Who I do have to note, because injuries reminded me, after championing Justin McInerney all year, he looked like absolute shit in this game. And I think he would have been a good candidate to get subbed out had Logan McDonald not gotten hurt. There's one moment in particular in the third quarter that I just couldn't fucking believe. Off the top of your head, do you know the play I'm referring to?
Oh, was this when he tried to get too cute and then the Lions rebounded and kicked the first goal of the third?
He's like deep in the right pocket. He's in great position to receive a Tom Papley handball. Papley handballs it, and instead of, just taking the handball and running towards goal or something, it's one thing if he would have taken it and then just completely biffed the kick. Like if he just, kicked it across the face or something, or blasted it into the post, it happens. But no, for some reason, instead of just receiving the handball like normal, he decides to try to just punch it back to Tom Papley. And instead, Brandon Starcevich launches a counterattack. Archie gets the goal. And it's just like, how did that happen? That's not something somebody does when they're receiving a handball, especially not in that spot. And this should not undo how good he was throughout the season.
Really, it was him and James Rowbottom who we saw as the pieces that held a lot of stuff together.
Rowbottom, another very James Rowbottom stat line in this game. He actually led all players with 10 clearances, but only 4 tackles. And I just thought, as much as he did a good job of getting in there and challenging guys like Neal and Dunkley and everyone else, I just thought the super high effort couldn't quite make up for the deficit in talent with the guys he was facing off against. So I don't want to fault James Rowbottom. I'm just not going to give him like the immense praise that I have in a couple of other games when he's been like our vote recipient for, the actual polished turd, right? Did he get a polished turd vote at some point? Wait,
I'm not sure if Rowbottom did. However, he got the threes from us for both Sydney Derbies, when in reality, Errol Golden got the Brett Kirk medal both times.
Thanks, Basil. I'm actually looking at our polished turd data, and he never got one, which is kind of surprising.
Not too many losses to go around. I'm not too surprised.
Maybe it's also just when we see Rowbottom in wins, it's like, oh, they've got all these guys and then also James Rowbottom, instead of being like the guy who stands up and kind of is the leader.
Speaking of Dunkley, by the way, he was the tackle leader in this game with 11.
I thought he was pretty sharp. There's a group of about 7 players that I would consider the standouts for the Lions, and I would not necessarily put him in that group, but I would still say he played a good game. And if Josh Dunkley plays a pretty quality game, and yet you have at least 7 guys that outperformed him on a day where you had no standout, that's a really good problem to have.
He played that good defensive midfielder job against Heaney, managed to keep him out of a lot of things. That's what helped the Lions feel like they always had an extra number getting out of the center. So, yeah, Dunkley's not a guy that maybe you consider for any of your Gary Ayers or Norm Smith votes. I can tell you, in fact, he didn't get a Norm Smith vote, but it's not the type of game that they win without him. So, yeah, he's now beaten the Swans for 2 premierships on 2 different teams after the Swans decided not to select him with a father-son pick. I know there was kind of negotiations in place there, I know, but it's significant enough to mention. Also, the Swans are the only team against whom Josh Dunkley has not kicked a goal. I think that's a good transition into the Lions post-mortem.
Yeah, but I guess the question for the Swans is like, how do they react to this? My guess is they aren't going to do anything drastic. That doesn't seem to be in their DNA, and it's part of why they've been consistently good. But it's absolutely fair to ask, like, what needs to be changed? Because with this group, with this much talent, there should be some sense of urgency. And if there's one change that I would make out of this game, it's that I would try to bring in, like, a big-time defender. That's another team that really could have used, like, a Tom Barris. I think I actually said that in our grand final preview. Or no, I said that Port could really use him, probably. But yeah, Sydney could probably use that, like, lockdown one-on-one guy.
Rapey hasn't been that for a long time, if ever, plus he's 34. Tom McCartan's only 24, but I'm not nearly as confident in his one-on-ones as I used to be.
Maybe they're still feeling the absence of Paddy McCartan, who I guess he was more usually in like a sweeping role, but he was a valuable piece.
Meanwhile, Lewis Melkin's already 27 and was steadily beaten. Harry Cunningham is 30, and that's not the type of place he plays, so yeah, key defense is probably the biggest positional need for the Swans.
I would say it might be the only positional need. Maybe key forward. See what happens with Logan McDonald. There's always talk about him. And still waiting to get consistency out of Joel Amartey. It was disappointing after Amartey had made such high-effort plays in the last 2 games that he wasn't able to kind of force himself into the action in this one. So the Brisbane Lions, you did it. You won the football.
Everybody have a happy football!
This team was 2-5 after getting pantsed by GWS in Canberra. They came off of a really exciting draw against the Crows with a 119-point over Richmond. It was even 163-44. And then they had their loss to Hawthorn because they never get to play Hawthorn at home, and they can never beat Hawthorn, it seems. And then coming out of the bye, they rattled off 9 straight wins. Then came a home loss to GWS, which surprised me. Not that I was surprised that they were going to run out of steam from that win, but because I thought there's no way they lose a 4th game at the Gabba. They only went 7-4 at the Gabba in the home and away season. One of those wins being the Origin win, another being a really exciting win over the Swans. Other than that, they didn't really have any like impressive home wins on their ledger.
By Origin, of course, we mean the I think it was 86-81 over Melbourne, which was Ashcroft's first game back that had the Boundary McCluggage goal at the end.
Off of the Alex Neil-Bowen try.
Otherwise, yeah, really their impressive wins were on the road, and they won 2 finals at the G for the first time in God knows how long.
I guess their most impressive wins, well, they beat a mostly healthy Melbourne team. So their round 5 win at the MCG over Melbourne was impressive. Spanking the Bulldogs at Marvel was impressive. Spanking Port at the Adelaide Oval on a day when Port was having their 2004 reunion was impressive. But it's not like this team had played its absolute best. And I just thought, they had put themselves in too big of a hole and they had to expend too much energy climbing out of it. But I want to highlight one little change in particular. It's kind of like one of those, clickbait ad things. Other coaches hate him. See how one change made Chris Fagan the hottest man in Australia.
And the oldest premiership coach, and the only one to have not played top-level Victorian football.
Having Zach Bailey play more in the defensive 50 and help launch counterattacks because he wasn't getting involved as much scoring-wise. And I don't know how much of that was that Bailey was underperforming and how much of it is just that other players took charge there. That's also part of where Kyle Oman was able to improve, as well as maybe Jasper Fletcher to an extent. And he was in a more muted role in this game. Especially in the prelim, Zach Bailey did a fantastic job of getting involved all over the ground and impacting the game. And that was kind of like one of the missing links that became such a huge part of this team.
Bailey has been one of my favorite Lions for really the 5 years that we've been watching. It was him getting involved in defense and just keeping that up on the wing because I believe positionally he was officially a winger for this finals run. But having him help out, maybe not starting behind the ball, but being ready for that first disposal to the outside was such a huge factor. And he's got good finishing ability, but you've got so many others here that you can be flexible with the role that he plays. Meanwhile, you've got to keep Cam Rayner in more of a forward spot, and you don't want to get in the way of Archie at this point. Yeah, Archie's another big one because he's one who would have had more of that wing job if you're looking at really a best 23, if you're looking at how the Lions were at the start of this season. It was Lincoln McCarthy's ACL injury that brought Archie into more forward situations, that defensive forward spot where he excelled. I'm just so pleased that Archie finally got some of the recognition that he's been due.
I guess the term lightning rod might be incorrect here because, a lightning rod is meant to kind of draw lightning away from somewhere else and consolidate it all. So I'm not sure what exactly the best comparison would be, but when he's able to inject his speed into the forward 50 in short little spurts, really, really good things happen.
It's felt like for the back part of the season, the game is almost magnetically attracted to him in some way.
As for Rayner, the way he's able to, not unlike Jason Horn-Francis, link both the midfield and forward 50, I really enjoy. He's got some good long kick accuracy, and he is definitely my favorite Brisbane Lion, and I am super happy for him.
One of many great stories on this Lions team.
I also really like Will Ashcroft. I haven't been quiet about that either, but that's kind of a common opinion.
Rayner and Ashcroft both having done ACLs in the past few years. You've got the longtime club servant in Ryan Lester finally getting a premiership medal, 207 games over 14 years. He is the longest tenured member of this list. He's younger than Dane Zorko by a good bit, by 3 years. But yes, he's been on the list the longest.
It is incredibly cool that this team, this collection of personalities and players that, in the 5 years that we've been watching this sport have all been very important pieces, got to do this. And it feels like, again, as much as there's a window for these guys to be awesome long term, this does kind of feel in a way like there's some closure because, they've been there from the start for us in our footy watching journey.
Yeah, Lester even he hardly played in 2022, but in 2020, he played 15 games. So yeah, he had been there from the start in that respect. Great stories there. Redemption for Jared Berry. He said he'd been holding that 50. He'd given up to Steele side bottom against him for pretty much the whole year until they made it back to the grand final. He was another one of those players that was helpful in getting the ball out of defense, then had an intercept mark and goal for himself. He had a goal from 20. And then you've got the younger guys coming in. There's Ashcroft in there, Jasper Fletcher as well, Adrian Fletcher's son. There's Lohman, of course, and there's Logan Morris with his legacy built by Macca's. Subbed off, definitely a victory cigar feeling there, but 2 goals, 1 from 10.
I do call it a victory cigar because At that point, it's we've won. We just want to get our guy in there.
And Connor McKenna's another great story. Coming back from Northern Ireland, remember, he left after catching all sorts of flack from the media for, oh no, getting COVID. If you recall, back in 2020, I believe it was a round 3 game between Melbourne and Essendon that had to be rescheduled because of COVID diagnosis for McKenna close to the game, and the media kind of hounded him for the rest of the year. And he was like, fuck this. This is how you're going to treat me? I'm going to go back and try to win an All-Ireland Senior Championship, which he did. Then he came back as a supplemental pickup for Brisbane, and I didn't think he was going to get as much time this year until, well, Kadeen Coleman did his ACL in opening round.
And when they tried to have him not play the exact same role as Kadeen Coleman, that also helped a lot.
Oh yeah, Darcy Ford also, game 36, final number 2. It's just the story of the backup ruck.
This was not the team that I would have thought would have been, all year long, kind of like inconsistent, not great, and like, they're going to be there at the end because they didn't have the proven track record of it. As opposed to, 2020 Richmond, kind of felt like, it was just always going to be Geelong anyway. That could have been a thing. And instead it ends up being the Lions, which, like, if you had told me at the start of the year that would have happened, on one hand could have said, sure, that's going to happen. It's another of those, I'll believe it when I see it.
They were the flag favorites going into the year, and then just everything else happened. All right. Do you give the Lions opening round Thursday?
I think you offer it to them, assuming opening round is a thing again.
It likely is, and you'd imagine they'd either get Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, I would say there's a good chance they would either host Carlton again or maybe Geelong.
Carlton seems like the right pick there if you're trying to get the greatest travel. And we talked about what other things we want to see in opening round. I think Giants and Hawthorn could be a great one, but I have a feeling they'd probably try to keep the Giants-Collingwood matchup. The problem that I had with opening round this year, looking back, is that only one of those games was a double-up.
Yeah, that seems like a missed opportunity. If we're really going to drum up the hype, you probably want to turn that into a rematch.
And the only one that was the Richmond Gold Coast bookend. Just want to make it official just to mention our sleepers for both of the teams going into the year. For Sydney, you mentioned Indy Kirk just because he's Brett Kirk's son.
Thanks, Basil.
I had Braden Campbell.
I'm already claiming Caden Cleary for next year.
I kind of expected that, but Braden Campbell, I think I was proven very right in terms of his sub-impact in the qualifying final, and I'm going to keep mentioning him. Always going to be underrated, I think, because he'll be overshadowed by McDonald and Golden from that 2020 draft class. And for the Lions, you had the amazingly named
Shadow Brain. He made a bit of an impact. He looked like he belonged at the AFL level.
Yeah, played 9 games this year, played 5 full games. He was 6-1-2. He debuted as a sub in a draw.
Hell yeah, he did.
Trying to think, who was he dropped for after round 23? Was that how McKenna got back in? Looking at round 24, that was when Noah Answorth and Connor McKenna both came in. Answorth, hell of an end to the season as well, really completing things on the small defensive side.
Yeah. I think it was last week where it was like, wait a minute, he had how many tackles?
It was the semi where he had 11 against the Giants. He had 8 against Geelong. Those were his 2 highest tackle counts for the year.
Yeah, it wasn't like obvious, kind of like,
like James or Charlie Rowbottom.
Yes, exactly.
And then my sleeper for the Lions this year was Froggy. I know it feels weird to have called him a sleeper, but remember there was a thought that Duday was going to potentially play at some point, that Darcy Gardner would have a more prominent role, whether that was forward or back. Instead, Lester held his spot, and he finally has a premiership medal. He played all 27 games this year, in fact, when he had never played more than 22 before and had played 19 in 2023. So just, I think if there's one feel-good story on this Lions team, it is Ryan Lester.
I think there are a bunch of feel-good stories, but he's one of them. I guess we have some general
News, everyone!
to attend to now.
Yeah, the West Coast Eagles have named Andrew McQuall to their head coach, which I saw from the beginning because it gives them the inside track to get Liam Baker and Jack Graham. I think pick 13 will be overpayment for Baker. So I hope there's something else tied in there, maybe something else with a return to the Hawthorne deal, or factoring in compensation they could get from whatever they're going to sign Graham to.
So I guess the idea then would be that Shea Bolton ends up at Frio.
He's not going to officially nominate one Western team over the other, but that seems incredibly likely given Frio's draft hand and what the Eagles are already going to be tied up in. The only other big move that I could see the Eagles making is if Chad wants out.
I don't think that's happening right now.
I don't either. But I don't see the Eagles making bigger splashes this year. It's important to hold on to the top of their draft hand in a pretty deep year. I'm just waiting to see what surprises you like during the time that you're going to be locked down.
Yeah, I'm just hoping to know about like the Bailey Smith stuff before that.
So with the trade period fast approaching, I mean, that's all going to be done in within 2 weeks.
I also just realized like the combination of Liam Baker and Jake Waterman's hair, the Eagles can now start to have their own hair thing. We kind of have a thing like that in Geelong.
Yep, blonde with a thin headband. The hope is that we're going to do a trade period recap like as soon as that's done. And I'm hoping Ethan can go dark either on that Sunday or Monday. I'll make the determination based on how quickly or not things are progressing. Other than that, I mean, that does it for the men's season on the field. Obviously, going to be even more in tune with the women's season. And now that there's a bit more time on my hands in that respect, and also that the Eagles are going well. They're 4-2. I watched a good amount of their 24-point win over the Giants. Ella Roberts is developing really well, and I just can't believe how quickly they're turning things around.
This is not the end of our season. We're going to have our trade stuff. We're not going to be recording as frequently, but we will have some off-season programming. We definitely do want to do some interviews that I've kept talking about for like multiple years. I want to actually try to line up the time and get that together this year.
Also want to start showing our friends some games as well and seeing their reactions and just gauging their interest in the sport overall. We've talked about Port Adelaide versus Melbourne in round 3 being a really strong candidate for that.
Yes, that is the one I would personally really like to do. So I've definitely got at least 1 or 2 people for that.
I guess the last thing to take care of here, obviously your mark of the grand final was the Rainer hanger. The goal of the grand final was Hipwood, and then he channeled Ackermanis.
Yeah, runner-up, I think, would be Lohman's 3rd. But yeah, it was definitely Hipwood's. Although, also the really long Warner bomb was pretty cool.
It was, but it's Hipwood.
Yeah.
Main character.
Is it just Will Ashcroft?
Is it Ashcroft for winning the Norm Smith? Is it Big O?
I have no idea.
I'm still not convinced about last week's main character even. And who's our main character of 2024? Is it Ken Hinckley?
I think it's between him and Luke Beveridge, and I think because of which team went on farther in finals, I think it has to be Hinckley.
I feel comfortable with that. So in the 3 years that we've done this, 2022 main character Jack Ginnivan, 2023 main character Nick Dacos.
We didn't name a main character in 22, but he was obviously the one. So, yeah, I guess that's about it from us.
Yeah, our schedule's going to be much less defined for the rest of the year. It won't be twice a week, but hopefully it'll be more than once every 2 weeks. And definitely hoping to get those interviews together and looking forward to you hopefully knowing less about trades this year than last.
At some point in the next couple weeks, maybe we'll do a full episode breaking down America's Brownlow stuff. We talked about that some last episode, but depending on what other analysis I do, maybe we could do some more. I don't know. We'll come up with something.
Until next time, he's at Castle Media. I'm at Benjamin HK01. The executive producer is at Cat Named Brian, and we are at America's Footy on a bunch of different socials. Good time of day from California.
Fire John Harbaugh.